Thank you, Ambassador Pillay, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the invitation for me to the DD6 to share my view on ASEAN-India cooperation. It's given me an opportunity to think more about ASEAN-India after the completion of the Eminent Person Group report to the in 2012, correct? 2012. In 2012. Well, although the chair has said that he's going to be generous, but I think it's still in the interest of time. I'll focus on the big picture of the regional architecture in my presentation, and I would also be focusing on the strategic part, the strategic architecture of the regional architecture in the Asia Pacific. I'll divide my remarks into three parts. First, the overview of the regional architecture in the Asia and Pacific. The second part will be on ASEAN on India as ASEAN partner in the ASEAN-led regional architecture. And very briefly, I'll touch on the emerging concept of the Indo-Pacific. So, on the regional architecture, in the overview of the regional architecture in the Asia-Pacific, it's been said a lot here, the facts and the background, but I think my remark will be that the existing ASEAN-led regional architecture has unique features. It has evolved over time in response to circumstances rather than by design that with well laid out blueprints. So it may appear confusing with multiple institutions and fora, overlapping memberships and agendas, and even possible clashing interests. A second unique feature is that there's no overarching body. Rather, I feel that it's a jigsaw of overlapping frameworks for cooperation based on shared and common interests and some shared understanding of similar norms of behavior and codes of conduct. It's still evolving, but members somehow find a way to manage the process and as well as the process of change or evolving in the architecture, in the regional architecture. But supplementing this regional architecture are also sub-regional cooperation frameworks that have their own interests. Generally, they speak to promote economic and development cooperation, drawing on available resources and expertise, but not excluding support from non-members. Whereas India today is part of all key ASEAN-led arrangements in the regional architecture, namely the ARF, ADMM+, and the EAS, perhaps with the exception of APEC. So it may not be too wrong to say that the regional architecture is open, inclusive, focusing on cooperation rather than having hard and fast rules to abide by. My second part is the role of India as partner in the Asia-Pacific regional architecture. Well, perhaps at the risk of repeating earlier speakers, but I may have to repeat the role of India as ASEAN partner. We all know that from the late 1990s onwards, India has become a more important part of ASEAN and generally viewed as potentially an important partner of the Asia Pacific, although not part physically yet, or not physically part of the Asia Pacific. We know that the Look East policy and the growing recognition of opportunities of closer trade and economic links with Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific underline India's greater engagement with the region. And the future of ASEAN-India relations have been laid down by the ASEAN-India Vision Statement at the ASEAN-India Commemorative Summit in 2012. It's comprehensive. It covers the whole spectrum of political, security, economic, socio-cultural, and development cooperation. And the vision statement echoes the commitment of both ASEAN and India in advancing regional cooperation and integration, and reaffirms continued engagement of India in the evolving architecture of the Asia Pacific. Again, I will have to emphasize connectivity issue. Connectivity between India and ASEAN has gained much emphasis as a means to enhance partnership and opportunities for trade, investment, and industries. There are still lots of missing links and challenges, as the previous session has illuminated. But the will is there. I think the will is there, but there's just a question of how and how soon it will be realized. So with enhanced connectivity, opening new opportunities for cooperation, but we have also heard about have also been more aware of the potential for greater risks or new type of challenges like cross-border transnational crime, terrorism, and piracy, non-traditional security question. That also another area that ASEAN and India can cooperate. So, in order to take forward the ASEAN-India strategic partnership, of course it needs both sides to work closely together to take advantage of the opportunities and potentials that we have before us. And also we have to work together in addressing these challenges. ASEAN cannot do it alone, and I think India also knows that India cannot do it alone either. But in a wider environment beyond ASEAN and ASEAN-India cooperation, ASEAN and India are also part of the regional architecture in the Asia Pacific, which is widely acknowledged as undergoing some dynamics of transformation. We all know about the rise of China, the US pivoting in the Asia Pacific, rising India as a key regional and global power, reassertion of Japan in its role as the economic and potential security force in the region. There's also rising tensions, especially in the maritime areas, which can potentially affect regional security. A lot has been mentioned here at this dialogue. And lastly, the scope and complexity of transnational and cross-border challenges that affect all countries in the region. Well, China, the US, Japan are all strategic partners of ASEAN. So ASEAN is in the middle of this strategic landscape, as well as at the geographical crossroads between Asia Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And the regional architecture has ASEAN at the helm, at the driver's seat. So I think ASEAN and India are natural strategic partners to one another in managing these dynamics of change in the region to ensure continued stability, prosperity, and growth in the region. So I believe the closer engagement of India with ASEAN and the Asia Pacific is not only important but necessary for the evolving regional architecture. ASEAN will benefit from the wisdom of India as one of the largest, of the world's largest democracies. India is also a growing economic power. And as mentioned before at this dialogue, ASEAN and India have strong cultural and historic links. And we also have mutual trust. So a rising India and more engagement of India in the region does not mean competition for more influence, but I feel that it's perhaps I would like to see it as a competition for more cooperation, in the region, in the Asia and Pacific. And this is the heart of the open and inclusive regional architecture that ASEAN seeks to develop further with its partners. My last remark will be really short, actually. It's the Indo-Pacific idea, which is emerging. I was talking to Laura over lunch that we seem to be knowing not very little about this idea. And having left this some circle for a time, I've tried to find out more about this Indo-Pacific idea. I managed to read the Indonesian foreign minister's speech last year given in America. It's still very broad, but he is saying about shared norms and principles, which are, I think we all share those norms and principles, but little we know about that. So I just feel that we have to learn more about it. Cooperation cannot be negative, but perhaps if it can give some more concreteness to the concept, we can develop it further. I'm thinking of perhaps, with these two oceans linking together, or it's a geographic links, and so naturally, perhaps if we think of growing trade, growing investment, the two oceans will be linked in such a way, and that's an extension of land connectivity and other areas of connectivity that we have been discussing earlier. But little as we know, so I think perhaps we have to keep exploring the potential benefit or what the potential development of this concept. But I'm sure that in the spirit of cooperation in the region, it may provide another framework for cooperation to ensure peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. That I end my remarks.